This video is a little bit overdue, but welcome back to the channel, guys. This is exactly everything you need to know about wall traps in Fortnite Save the World. You can already get a little bit of a sneak peek now, but that's nothing about what we're gonna cover. So stay tuned. Here's everything you need to know, and we'll cut right into it. First things first, let's go ahead and begin with our broadsides. So we're going to cover every different wall trap from the broadsides, wall dynamos, all the way down to a wall spike. Although there's not too much to go over with wall spikes, we'll still talk about it a little bit. So beginning with our broadsides, these are kind of your heavy hitting traps. These aren't something you want to just place on the side of your retrieve the data and let it shoot out into the abyss. What you're going to see in all of the clips I add is how the traps should be used and how they can be used. Broadsides are kind of used more towards a trap tunnel rather than placing them on the side of a building and letting it just go wherever. Your broadside is actually going to be best used where it can bounce off of things. So if you have another wall for it to bounce off of in a trap tunnel, you can place one on each side shooting into each other, and they'll bounce back and forth, piercing all of the husks. That doesn't mean it's going to kill it in the first shot, because things like a smasher are going to take multiple hits. But it does mean as it continues to bounce back and forth, it can hit the same target multiple times, and it can hit multiple targets. Some other traps, like for example the wall dynamo, they're going to only be able to hit a certain amount of targets before it stops. Broadsides can hit everything as long as it gets touched by the cannonballs they fire. When broadsides are finished being used and they're currently reloading, these little hatches that you can see up here are going to fold down and cover. That's how you know if a trap is ready to shoot or if it's waiting to be reloaded. It does reload automatically like other traps, but it does have that little layover time that you have to give it. So you could always add a reload perk to it, and that way it's going to come back up and be ready to use again sooner. But to me, I rather just perk that out as a heavy hitting trap and let it do its thing. Honestly, these shouldn't be used in retrieve the datas unless you're building a tunnel. I see a lot of people just place it on the side, fire out into the abyss, and it will do damage, but it's not doing that much. Broadsides are really perked to the point where you want them to bounce off of things. You can also use it to where it's a 2x1 space, so you can have 2 floor tiles and then walls on either sides of those. As long as it has something to bounce off of, you'll be fine. Just make sure it's natural terrain, a wall, a stair, whatever, and these broadsides will be able to do the most damage possible. For the next trap, we have our wall dynamos. Honestly, these are a little bit iffy. In comparison to where the broadsides are better, you put a target in the middle and it can pierce to go back and forth. The dynamos are going to be another heavy hitting trap, but they're not going to do as much as you think. So the wall dynamos can shoot one tile out, can't shoot up, can't shoot down. Whatever husk is on the tile in front of it is what's going to be hit. It can't even shoot backwards. So the wall dynamo is mainly going to be used for shorter walls typically. For example, if you're building something going up a ramp, you don't want to place your broadside because it's going to hit the wall and fall down, so it's no longer getting used. Instead, going up or down ramps, you could place something like your wall dynamo, and then as a husk goes up or down, it's going to actually get hit by the wall dynamo. It's almost like an instant fire compared to the broadside takes a moment, then it fires, and then the physical cannonball has to touch it. With the dynamo, whatever's in there is going to get zapped with electricity, and you can even kind of see the animation when it goes off. It'll shoot a bolt of electricity to attach to whatever target is there. So if you're shooting a smasher, it's going to go out and hit the smasher. If there's multiple husks in that tile in front of it, it'll go out and hit all of those husks in there. It's another one of those hard-hitting traps. For example, right here it says does damage to all enemies in range when trap is triggered. Telling you basically, hey, if there's 5 different husks stood there, it's going to hit all 5. If there's 10 different husks stood there, it's going to hit all 10. It will hit everything in there, so you can use that to your advantage. This trap is honestly really good when you perk it of nature or energy, because energy, you get the best damage to all different types of husks. Physical, nature, water, you name it. But it also does really well with nature. So typically, or personally, I carry one with energy, one with nature. My energy is 144. I hope to get my nature up, but it's not quite there. And that's just because if I get a water zone, instead of using broadsides, I could run towards the dynamo. The wall dynamo is actually going to give you a little bit of an advantage when you have a different type of storm, whether it's firestorm, water storm, nature, whatever. So just a little thing to keep in mind. It does hit everything. It's another hard hitting trap. The broadside does hit harder than it, but to an extent, because if you get a water zone and you have a nature wall dynamo, it's going to do a whole lot more damage than your broadside would in that zone. Moving on to the sound wall, it's honestly an extremely useful trap. I have mine currently perked for all durability and reload speed, but if we head in here to the modify perks, you can check it out. You can also add impact on it. So you can add more durability or less, but you can add impact. And similar to pretty much every other trap, it's got an effect duration, which means when it hits, the husk is going to dance for longer. So a few traps like the wall lights, wall launchers, all of this have different impacts, and it pushes the husks. So personally, I only really use the sound wall for taking away the propanes and the shields from the shielder husks, just because I play a lot of endurances, and if you don't get rid of the propanes before they enter the trap tunnel, they're just going to end up killing themselves and blowing up the entire tunnel. Certain traps, such as sealing electric fields, can set them off, and especially other fire traps. So I like to place these at the front of my trap tunnels to make sure I take away all of the propanes before they get in and destroy my entire tunnel. People use them differently. You can use them for impact builds, but never really see it too much. This is the typical build you're going to see for them. The only difference, sometimes you might find a heals build attached instead of an increased building health. So sound walls are pretty useful. You can place them to get rid of the propanes and stop them from blowing everything up. You can also cause husks to dance with them, as I mentioned, and when they're danced, they're going to actually slow down a bit. So some reason people add the impact is because if they get hit with the impact, the husk can be stunned, as you can see right here by the stun time. And adding extra impact is going to increase that stun time as well as stagger the husk. So you can place it in a kill box, stun the husk, and then allow it to get hit by broadsides or something so the husk isn't moving around and they take more damage from the broadsides. I don't really use it for that purpose too much anymore. As I mentioned, now it's just for the propanes, but there's different ways you can use it. It's a very versatile trap. It can also shoot through stairs or pyramids. So if you have something, for example, a stall build and a retrieve the data or ride the lightning, you can use these to shoot through a stair and stall the husks from actually damaging your build. Or you can also just place them on a wall and prevent extra damage to your build. Another cool thing, you can place these on top of a wall that has a big window in it. That way you can place something like a wall dart to shoot through it, as we're going to talk about a little bit later. To jump back to the wall dynamo, that's the same idea. You can place these on windowed walls, short walls, medium walls, or just a full wall. So it gives you a little bit of an edge to the broadside as well. If you place a short wall, you can have a wall dart shoot over it, as you're going to see throughout this video. Since we were talking about wall darts, it makes more sense to cover them now. These unfortunately have to be placed on a full wall, but to the advantage, you can have a windowed wall, a short wall, or something in front of it. It can also shoot through stairs and pyramids, so if you have something in front of it for a build, it'll shoot through it. A lot of people believe this is a piercing trap. Unfortunately, it's not. For the longest time, I thought it was as well, but as you can see right here, it shoots 6 darts at enemies. It can shoot 3 tiles far. So if there's one enemy in there, like a smasher, to absorb that much, it shoots the 6 darts in a row. And if the smasher can hit all of them, then the smasher takes 6 darts worth of damage. Unfortunately, it cannot pierce through the smasher and hit something behind it, or pierce through a husk to hit multiple. The 6 individual darts will do the damage. So if I place this on a wall and it hits a smasher and there's a couple husks behind us, the smasher will just tank all 6 bullets. So it's something to keep in mind when placing these. But I typically use these because they can reach 3 tiles long. So I place them at the beginning or end of a trap tunnel, and that way it can shoot all the way down the tunnel and do damage to husks that are coming up. Or you can place it behind one of those windowed walls, short walls, whatever, and allow it to shoot across. I don't really know what it's called, but there's some heavy hitting trap tunnels you can build where you have, in a 2 tile space basically, one husk gets hit by 10 different traps as opposed to 2 wall traps, ceiling, and floor. You could place something like a floor freeze to hold it in place. You can have 2 wall darts on a tile over, so that way they're shooting in. A wall dynamo, on a short wall, a ceiling trap, and a floor trap. So there's some pretty cool things you can do. It's extremely useful for Twine Endurance when you have the level 240 husks or even more. I think I've seen them get up to around 300 in twine endurance. So it's pretty useful when you can have multiple traps hitting in a one tile block instead of only 4 traps. To me, I think the extended range of this trap is its main selling point as opposed to 6 different darts being fired. Because of the extended range, you can do so much more with this trap. It can be utilized in pretty much everything. It can be used in trap tunnels. You could honestly, I prefer placing these on my retrieve the data. If you're going to have 4 walls surrounding it, I highly recommend you use the wall dart instead of your broadside because this one doesn't bounce off of things. So if it goes out into the abyss, who knows, it might hit something else 3 tiles later, or it just ends and starts its reload animation. So this has an extremely different use from the broadside. As you're going to see, all of these traps are very, very unique. Some of them can replace each other, like the wall dart, or I'm sorry, the wall dynamo and broadside can. But still, you kind of want to go to one extent for each one. You know, for a trap tunnel, that's a straight line. Broadsides are going to be it. Wall dynamos are going to be for something else. But you can kind of interchange them in different positions. Meanwhile, the wall dart can't really change it. It's the wall dart. Everyone knows what it does, and hopefully now you do too. So, wall lights and wall launchers. Honestly, I gotta kind of talk to them or talk about them in the same area, just because they're kind of similar. As you can see, I have mine perked with 3 impact, a reload, and a durability. That's because these can stagger and stun the husks. So, for example, you can use this in combination with a floor launcher. You can have them get stunned, and then they sit there waiting for the floor launcher to recharge. They can't do anything, and by the time the floor launcher is recharged, it can already send the husk over to wherever you're pushing it because it just is stunned. It can't move anywhere. Luckily, though, you can also combine these in stall builds, jail builds, kill builds because once again, it's an extremely versatile trap. The sound wall, the wall launcher, and the wall lights can be used in pretty much any condition. You can use a wall launcher to push it into a box and then have a staggered sound wall and wall light. So that way, it gets danced, then it gets stunned when the dance effect ends, then it gets danced, then it gets stunned, and it just rotates. So that way you can trap them in a box. Stall builds aren't too popular anymore, but they really used to be back in, my time of early game. I don't see them used too much anymore, though, because now husks will despawn whenever they're stuck in an area for too long. So, unfortunately, there's not too many jail builds or stall builds anymore. But they're actually extremely useful for endurance. I know one of my old builds, I used to have husks climb a staircase, and it doesn't make sense to place a wall launcher there because if you have a smasher going up, it doesn't do anything. The wall lights, however, if you have something for 5 times impact, because you can go that high, I'll show you real quick. You can place another impact, impact, and then you can do effect duration to hold them longer, heals build, whatever. But because of the extremely versatile use of this trap, you can use it pretty much anywhere, and it honestly does a lot. If you look, it has an extremely high reload time, so you do have to add some reload speeds. Keep in mind, I already have one here, and it's still almost 9 seconds to reload, but the stun time of it, 2.5 seconds to stun. Pretty good thing to know, because if you add more reload or more impact, you can stun the husk. If you add an effect duration, you're going to make it stunned even longer. It's a pretty useful trap. I'll try and get some highlights of it used as well. Like, for example, one of my current builds, I have it so the husk gets stunned at the beginning, and the sound wall can recharge. This is because when the propanes are coming up into my tunnel, I don't have too much space to work with because of how close the spawn is to the ramp. So I can use this wall light to stun them, hold them in place, and allow the sound wall to do damage. I can also stun them and then place a tire drop above, so they're stuck there waiting for the tire drop to reload. It drops the tires and then pushes them back down the ramp. That way it's just a constant recycle, and I can save my traps for later on, because when you get into endurance, you are going to use up all of this durability. This 34 uses is going to go by fast. Almost in 2 waves, it'll be gone. So I don't see these used too much in missions, per se, but for storm shields and for endurances where you're surviving for multiple waves at multiple time periods, these can be extremely useful for saving your other traps for later in the waves. As I mentioned, we're going to go over the wall launcher next because it just makes more sense. The wall launcher and wall light both are used to push things. However, the wall launcher is a lot more powerful. When you don't have any impact perks on the wall launcher, it will move them 1 tile. So if you're moving them into a kill box, it's better if you go with no impact, so that way you can take the rest of these and make them durability and reload speeds. This is going to allow for the tunnel to be used more efficiently. If you're building a kill box, you don't necessarily want to have to wait for a, let's say, 8-second reload time, I believe it is, without reload speed. You want something to push them in a lot faster. So by putting the reload speed, it's going to knock them in, it's going to stun the husks, damage, and then you can do a damage build or a kill box to finish them off. There's also a lot of builds where you can push them off of the edge of map, push them into holes where they're stuck, and this way the husks despawn. It'll save you a lot of traps, save you a lot of materials, and you can still kill them. You can even push you can even push smashers with wall launchers, but it is a little bit more difficult. Whenever you hear that weird crunch sound with a floor launcher, it's because the smasher can't get pushed. It's too heavy and it's too tanky. Wall launcher is kind of the same effect. The smasher is so tanky, it takes a lot of stun, I believe it's called. Like, you have to stun it a lot in order for it to actually work. You can see right here, knockback is 2000. So I don't remember the math for it all, but the impact and knockback kind of go hand in hand to determine how far a different husk gets pushed. You know, the shield guys are a little bit beefier than a huskling, so they're not going to go as far. A smasher is a lot beefier, so he might only go half a tile when your normal husk might get flung 3 or almost 4. You can push smashers off with this still if you place an edited floor or you place corner walls, so that way you have the smasher walking on the edge of a floor. Then the wall launcher goes off, it can push him over. I use this in a lot of builds because I can use a recycle build in my endurance, which is a lot better off than a kill build. When you get to the later waves and they're over level 300, it's extremely difficult to kill them, so you're better off doing a recycle build. Here comes the wall launcher into play. Perfect recycling trap. Honestly, it's my favorite recycling trap. I never use the floor launchers and wall lights as much as I use the wall launcher, but who knows? I like to play the wall launcher really hand in hand with the sound wall though, because you can recycle them back out of the build, so that way any propanes that got missed in the first wave of the sound walls can go back and they have a chance to get hit again. You might have them get completely missed, or they might walk past the wall launcher. So I typically have around 2 bends, and every time I have a corner bend in my trap tunnel, there's a wall launcher to send them further back in the tunnel. If you think about it, and I'll include a clip right here so you can check it as I'm talking about it, you can have the wall launcher recycle them through, so they already took damage from one trap, then the wall launcher pushes them back, they get hit by the same trap again. If they don't die, they now have to try and get past the wall launcher again. If they don't, they get sent back, they get hit by the same trap again, and it just keeps recycling. If they do happen to get through, I just continue on my trap tunnel and they die later on. But it's extremely useful for saving your later traps in the tunnel, because you really want to save durability in endurance, but also in a mission sense. Anytime I'm close to the edge of the map, I push husks off. If I'm on some sort of cliff, I push husks off. It just saves me a lot of trap durability, a lot of traps, and a lot of materials. Rather than building a trap tunnel, I can just build a little pathway, put some wall launchers along it, throw the husks off, and if they don't die in a pit that I push them in, they have to walk all the way back, wasting another 10 or so seconds depending on how long the distance is. Extremely useful trap, different ways to perk it. You can add more reload, more durability, more impact or less. So it's some pretty cool thing to have. Last and honestly least, because I rarely use the wall spike. To be honest, I hate this trap. It's the wall spikes. I guess I kind of gave that away when I said its name in the intro, but here it is. It's honestly pretty self-explanatory. I never really see people using it as a damage trap, just because the husk has to be up on the wall to take damage from the wall spike. Most of the time you'll use trap tunnels and you'll place a wall dart or something to shoot further out, because anytime your husk gets to the wall, you kind of want to kill it before it touches the wall. Once it gets there for the wall spike, it has to do a hit and then it takes damage. So you might actually be letting your wall take damage by placing a wall spike, because it does a hit, hit, hit. It's not a constant pulse of damage. It's like, or yeah, it tells you right here, a second delay in between. So it'll hit, 1 second later, hit, 1 second later, hit. It's kind of odd, to say the least, just because I personally would rather kill husks before it gets to the wall, protecting my amplifier or my mission or whatever. But, you know, it is what it is. tells you right here, it does damage to enemies when they melee the trap. So as a husk hits the wall, then it deals damage. You're almost always going to see heals build attached placed on these, and that's just because if a husk hits the wall this is on, you really want the wall to heal. So every 10 seconds, it's going to heal for 4.8% of the max health, which, unless it's a smasher, is pretty much all of the health that it took from a hit. But if it takes multiple hits over the course of time, it's going to break. It just physically cannot heal the wall fast enough. So the other purpose these typically have is they're placed on the back of walls. I especially see it in endurance because sometimes you do have phasing husks. So by placing this on the back of the wall, as a husk phases through it, it takes damage from the wall spike and dies. Or you can place it on the back with heals build attached, so that way as a husk hits a wall and then dies, it can heal back up. Certain traps don't always have heals build attached, like the wall dynamo typically has increased building health from what I've seen, or an extra durability perk. So you can place a heals build attached on the back of that wall, and that way you're getting the increased building health or durability for the, let's say, the wall dynamo, but you're also able to heal the wall afterwards. The other thing it's used for is this handy dandy increased building health. It's honestly a complicated topic to get into, but increased building health goes hand in hand with block off. So that's mainly used for endurances and storm shields, but if you don't want to place extra builds, then you can place this on the back with increased building health and it gives it more health. Husks don't necessarily read, oh, that's a tile, so you don't have to place 6 walls and then it cancels. They see it more towards a health aspect of things. So what that means is your level 3 wall is going to deter a husk away from that building more than a level 1 wall. So upgrading walls isn't just so they don't break as easily, it's also so you can push a husk away instead of attacking it. The husk will always path where the AI wants and thinks is the closest route to, let's say, the mission, the player, or the amplifier if it's a storm shield or endurance. So by placing an increased building health or upgrading your walls, the AI is then going to read, oh, instead of 5 seconds to break through that wall, it's going to take me 10 seconds. Now, the pathway that would take 6 seconds to walk is less than it takes to break through the wall. So the AI is going to register as, hey, now I should go down this pathway. Instead of spending 10 seconds to break the wall, I can walk for 6 seconds and get there faster. So it's a pretty cool way to push husks over and get them to go down a different tunnel. I might be wrong with what I just said, but I'm pretty sure I explained it properly. If I'm wrong at any sort of time about any of these traps, please let me know in the comments so I can fix this, or so I can do a little bit more investigation so I can actually give out the proper information and the best information for you guys. But that's pretty much it for the video. I've covered all of the different traps to my knowledge. If I forgot one, I'll try and add a clip on the end, or I'll talk a little bit about it in the description or comments below. Pretty much all of the traps for the walls. So, hope you guys learned a little bit of something. Comment down below and let me know which trap you guys want me to cover next, whether it's floor, ceiling, or honestly, that's it. Comment whether it's floor or ceiling that you guys want to see next, and I'll go ahead and make a video for it. Hope you guys learned a bit, and I'll catch you guys next time.